In the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing, Jimmy Kimmel's recent suspension, and the FCC chairman making threats to pull broadcast licenses from ABC, the free speech debate is boiling over. Add to that, UK authorities are making arrests for online posts and has even said they'll pursue people outside of Britain, and a pattern emerges. It's clear that local and foreign governments have vested interest in stifling free speech. This isn't just a conspiracy theory. YouTube and Google's parent company, Alphabet, recently sent a letter to Congress confirming they were pressured by the federal government to censor content on their platforms. Today, I'll show you the receipts, what actually changed at YouTube, and the real challenges and opportunities for creators and free speech advocates in this climate. Before we can dive into this letter, we need to understand a few things. What is free speech? Who does it protect? And what isn't considered protected speech? According to ChatGPT, free speech is your right to express ideas, opinions, facts, and art without government censorship or punishment. What counts as free speech could vary based on your country. In the USA, our freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment, and it also protects our right to hear information, not just to speak it. This doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. There are some limitations to freedom of speech. Things like child sexual abuse material, fraud, defamation, threats, incitement of violence, perjury, etc. are not considered protected speech. In a nutshell, free speech limits the government, not platforms. This story only changes if officials pressures or direct moderation decisions on platforms like YouTube. So let me get into the facts of the matter right in this letter here. If you want to see the letter, I'm going to leave some information in the show notes on how you can find the PDF and download it. I really recommend download it. I downloaded it and printed it out and read it and made some highlights of some key concerning points that really bring the whole free speech debate into focus from a perspective of persons who were displaced, from a perspective of challenges, and from a perspective of there's going to be positive going forward and there's going to be good news coming out of this as well. Despite the challenges and despite the current climate as it pertains to free speech, there's still going to be some positive and some opportunities coming out of this. So I'm going to highlight some of the most important points that I believe that should be discussed and that we should talk about as a whole. Please jump in the comment section. I want to hear what you guys think, because this letter is pretty damning, right, in terms of what is exposed and how this whole thing went down, right? So section 8, because obviously if you look at the letter, I can put some screenshots on screen. Each section is numbered, so we can easily reference a specific section number, go through, read that, have some commentary about it. Section 8, senior Biden administration officials, including White House officials, conducted repeated and sustained outreach to Alphabet and pressed the company regarding certain user-generated content related to the COVID-19 pandemic that did not violate its policies. While the company continued to develop and enforce its policies independently, Biden administration officials continued to press the company to remove non-violative user-generated content. That's a big one. That's probably the most damning point in this whole thing. There's some other damning points too, but what this really means is that the White House repeatedly leaned on and pressured the Alphabet platform to censor content. They're admitting to it. But the real question is, though, not even just why did it comply. The real question is, when you think about the fact that this confirms government put pressure on this platform to censor content that didn't violate its policies. And I don't know how familiar you are with B, but these companies have licenses, have policies and agreements that work in tandem with the government. So if a company design a policy internally, that will mean that that policy has to be aligned with the rules and laws and the regulation of the government, right? It's fair to say that those policies have to be in alignment with the laws of the land, which we could touch on later on, because we're going to talk about the impact of government policies in Europe and how that impacts a platform like YouTube, which is an American platform that wants to operate in the United Kingdom, which means there's obviously rules and regulations there that differ from the rules and regulations here in the United States of America. But bringing it back home, we got the government pressuring YouTube to censor content that doesn't violate policies that obviously align with law. So my first question is going to be, who's going to be accountable for this? Is there going to be any repercussions for this? Is YouTube going to be sued, fined? Do the creators have any kind of, legal footing to go after them and to say, hey, you censored my content when they didn't violate your policies, because clearly you outlining it here now in this letter? Anyhow, the stakes high, right? Because free speech, especially in America, is a serious thing. So we go on to point 9, which discusses the political atmosphere, right? As online platforms, including Alphabet, grapple with these decisions, the administration officials, including President Biden, created a political atmosphere that sought to influence the actions of platforms based on their concerns regarding misinformation. So what this really means is that this isn't just a one-off email where these people say, hey, stop doing this thing, censor this content. This is sustained pressure by the federal government on a private entity, and not just a private entity which is supposed to promote free speech that wasn't breaking the rules, still being pressured by the federal government to stop it. Serious business here we talking about. Regardless of what side of the fence that you sit on, we got some receipts here that really changing how we have to look at platforms, especially when you consider the fact that Meta came out, Mark Zuckerberg himself came out and said that the same thing happened. They went on record to confirming the same thing. So there's two companies now, right? When we look at Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, that Elon Musk had to purchase, that was also a platform that censored certain type of content, and one could argue that that content was left-leaning, that was allowed to thrive on that platform was left-leaning. Did the Biden administration also have a hand in that? Because I mean, suffice it to say, if we got Facebook going on record, if we got YouTube going on record, this rabbit hole got to be deeper than you could possibly imagine. But anyhow, we ain't gonna stick on it too long, but it really would help explain why moderation during that time, during the pandemic time, the COVID-19 time, was so inconsistent and could seem so aggressive, unusually aggressive, according to ChatGPT. Point 10, YouTube notes that this is unacceptable and wrong. So it's unacceptable and wrong when any government, including the Biden administration, attempts to dictate how the company moderates content, and the company has consistently fought against those efforts on First Amendment grounds. So here's the big question I have, and you can let me know what you think in the comments. Why did they capitulate if they're going to say to me, we fought against this on First Amendment grounds? So they would have had legal precedent to say no to the Biden administration. Not just to fight against it, but to say no to it. So the real question now I have is, why didn't they say no? Was it because they had political affiliation to the Biden administration as well? Was it because they did not like Trump and Trump supporters? I was watching Matt Walsh yesterday. I don't know if you know who he is, but he is a conservative commentator, and he has some clips with some video clips of Google representatives talking about the election and how they feel about the fact that Trump got elected, which is separate and distinct from this video, but it's pretty damning evidence to make you wonder, at least for me, wonder if they had political affiliations tied up in this as well. Because obviously, if we bring things down to a real life scenario, if I got a friend who believes in my views and he doing something with another person that I know that I don't really like, and me and my friend tight, I may go to him and say, but you know what? Tim is a joke, Tim is a joke, So start hanging out with Tim so much, man. I don't really like Tim, but use my man, start hanging out. And my friend could be like, you know what? Use my man, Dre. You know what? I can start hanging out with Tim. And it's as simple as that. But here they're outlining it and they're making it seem to be some sort of pressure. Now, obviously, that is just, at this point, that is just me thinking that stuff in the sky. Wondering about things. But it makes you wonder. Because if you're fighting against it based on First Amendment grounds, but yet you're still complying to the pressure of the administration, what kind of pressure this was? Was this based on good relationships, being in good standing, donations? I don't know, you name it. But it brings it into question, why did they comply, even though they're saying here now they fought against those efforts on First Amendment grounds? So yeah, they draw the line in the stand and said that government should not dictate moderation, but they claim they push back, but they still comply. Those three ones are kind of the three most damning ones, if you ask me, in terms of how this whole thing played out and in terms of what we can consider an admission of Google. But this rabbit hole goes a little bit deeper. So let's talk about what changed and what policies were in place that caused this whole kerfuffle to begin with. Section 17 outlines the COVID policy evolution, which outlines certain rollbacks and retirements of certain policies. The company has transparently evolved its policy framework related to COVID-19 to ensure space for further debate and discussion on the platform. A. YouTube never had community guidelines prohibiting discussion of the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. B. As publicly announced in 2023, YouTube ended several COVID-19 content policies. C. As of December 2024, YouTube retired the remaining standalone COVID-19 policies and allowed discussion of various treatments for COVID-19. So what this really means is that the rules changed. So obviously they went in and changed some stuff. So like they said in the point before, they admitted it was wrong and they pushed back. So now here we are, they're changing up stuff, they're making some changes. So it sounds like some policies ended in 2023 and it sounds like the remainder of the policies ended in 2024. Which brings into question the whole topic of shadow banning. For a long time, I've seen creators back and forth on channels talking about shadow banning being real, not real, being a figment of imagination. But here is that it sounds like there is a very good chance that it could be real. I am still not a 100% believer in the whole shadow banning concept, but we'll discuss that later in the video when we get to some opportunities and we wrap up. So stick a pin in that one for now, and let's cover another really damning one that I want to talk about. Point 19, which covered elections policy sunset, June 2023. YouTube continues to enable a diversity of perspectives and believes creators should be able to openly debate political ideas on the platform. In June 2023, YouTube sunsetted a policy to allow for discussion of possible widespread fraud, errors, or glitches occurring in the 2020 and other past presidential elections. So this confirms that there was restrictions and limitations on content that spoke about election fraud. Now, this is very, very important, you guys. So I want you to pay attention here because for me, there's a lot that I infer from this. And my key takeaway here is that, yes, clearly they suppress content. They suppress political content, which means, for lack of better words, they either pick a side, which they shouldn't have if they want to be a free speech platform, or B, this pressure from the Biden administration was so immense that they had no choice. I don't know, it don't work inside of Google, but it's something to consider, I'm a heavy ChatGPT user, right? And I like to get other opinions, especially in terms of my interpretation of stuff. Because when we having conversations and we having debates about things, we can infer different things and we could have different opinions on what we've heard, which doesn't reflect the truth or the reality of the situation. So as a heavy ChatGPT user, what I did is that I asked ChatGPT specifically about what I read into point 19, because I thought point 19 was even more damning than the whole COVID-19 stuff. Because the COVID-19 stuff, we could have arguments saying that, it's based on science. Misinformation can be dictated in science, but I'm sure that they had creators on both sides which had access to scientific information, because it came out after COVID-19. Things come out after the fact that were scientifically proven. But anyhow, don't let me get too distracted. Let's go back and look at what ChatGPT's breakdown of point 19 really was. I asked ChatGPT, help me understand point 19 from the letter. To me, it infers that it means there were policies in place that suppressed or limited views regarding political/election content. And ChatGPT thought for 27 seconds and let me know this. You're reading it right. Here's the plain English breakdown of point 19. What existed before? Pre-June 2023. YouTube had an elections misinformation policy that removed videos claiming widespread fraud, errors, or glitches changed the outcome of the 2020 US presidential election, and similar claims. That policy limited certain types of election fraud claims on the platform. What changed in June 2023? YouTube says it sunsetted or ended that policy for past US presidential elections. In practice, that means creators are now allowed to discuss or debate claims of widespread fraud errors in 2020 and other past elections without being taken down just for those claims. What didn't change? Other rules still apply. Content can still be removed for things like inciting violence, doxing, direct harassment, or misleading people about how, when, or where to vote. Ending the specific past election frauds removal policy doesn't create a free for all. So does this mean views were suppressed before? In policy terms, yes. That category of claims was restricted or removed under the old rule, which limited how freely those claims could circulate on YouTube. The point in the letter is saying that the policy is no longer enforced for past elections to enable broader political debate now. The bottom line, your inference is essentially correct. There was policy that limited certain election fraud claims, and YouTube ended that policy in June 2023 for past elections while keeping other safety integrity rules in place. Now, that's a lot of information to digest. Clearly, they suppress information. Here, they're saying that they suppress specific information, but of course, if they go in on record here because they're subpoenaed, I don't think they're going to volunteer any other information other than the information that they have to, right? Which means they could omit certain other things. But the reality is, it sounds like they pick a side. Because if you look at things like Russiagate, the Hunter Biden laptop, all things that Trump would say or would argue that these are things that could influence the election and could be construed as election fraud, all that's content that was suppressed. All that's information that could have, if it were allowed to surface, change the outcome of the election. But information was suppressed, no changes happened, people lived through the 4 years, which is all fine and dandy. But to reverse it now, little too late, always a little too late. But this ChatGPT also highlights some other things that I want to touch on, because when I start out the video, I kind of talk about what isn't considered protected speech, and obviously some of the policies, as you can see, reflect the fact that there ain't everything that can be considered free speech. So by saying, misleading people about how, when, and where to vote, doxing, inciting violence, directing harassment, all those are things that I could agree with, right? If I be honest, because they need to be guardrails. And I ain't just want to make a video just blasting YouTube. Yes, I agree. They need to be guardrails on certain things. But to intentionally limit certain discourse is very concerning, because it brings back the question. In terms of this now, we talking about election fraud here. We talking about election fraud claims. So obviously a side has been chosen. However you want to look at it, right? A side has been chosen. Did the same pressure about COVID-19 apply in a situation where did the Biden administration pressure them to suppress electoral information, political information? Obviously, they're not saying it here in this case, but they mention it about the COVID-19, but they're not directly saying it as it pertains to the election fraud and this political type of content. So if the government didn't pressure them, the real question becomes, if the government didn't pressure them, why did they have those policies to begin with? You can let me know what you think in the comments, because there's some interesting discussion and I'm interested to hear what you think. You agree with me that this is nonsense, or do you think it's okay because who cares? Right? But I think it's something that we need to talk about, because at the end of the day, if you have a situation where there could have been electoral fraud claims and an administration or a president was elected fraudulently, and then that administration pressure a social media platform to suppress any information that could have uncovered or exposed their election fraud, which had caused them to win the election, that is a big deal. I know conspiracy theorists, but I just keep it real, because it's either YouTube decide to suppress the electoral content on their own, or the government pressure them, which we can clearly see that the government pressured COVID-19 content, the government being the Biden administration. So what's to say that the Biden administration didn't try to cover up the fact that maybe there was election fraud? Maybe it was real. Maybe people were not crazy after all. They get censored anyway. We would never know. But God is moving in mysterious ways. So how things play out is probably how they were supposed to play out. Anyhow, don't let me get too tied up in this thing. Let me get back to business, right? Point 19 was interesting, right? Point 19 was very interesting because that tie in politics. I know I'm a political channel, but we need to talk about these things because it impact each and every one of us. All right, we go. Point 23, the path to reinstatement, right? Because clearly a lot of people were disenfranchised by these decisions. So let's talk about it. The company terminated channels for repeatedly violating its community guidelines on elections integrity content through 2023 and COVID-19 content through 2024. Today, YouTube community's guidelines allow for a wider range of content regarding COVID-19 and elections integrity. Reflecting the company's commitment to free expression, YouTube will provide an opportunity for all creators to rejoin the platform if the company terminated their channels for repeated violations of COVID-19 and elections integrity policies that are no longer in effect. What this means, there's a path back for people that were impacted by this, whose content was removed, whose channels were deleted. But is this too little too late? Because clearly people lost money for this. Is it going to be some sort of restitution? Is there going to be any kind of reparations for the people that was disenfranchised with this decision? Especially considering that this decision was pressured by the government. Who is accountable here? Who do you think is liable? YouTube or the government or both? Because there has to be the question of accountability. Because I don't really believe that you can capitulate to the government's will, admit that it was wrong, say that you fight against it, still comply, and then just turn and say, well, yeah, we did it. Okay, we can let y'all get back to your channels. Because I'm sure that this destroyed lives. And if you look at my man Matt Walsh, again, like he was affected by this back in the day. His channel was kind of taken down. He couldn't create content. But that's a big creator. That's a person that affiliated with Daily Wire and would have multiple income streams and would be able to weather the storm and would not have to capitulate to certain types of censorship. But there are other creators that who might be making a lot of money, who might not be big as Matt Walsh, and who may not have that additional support or that additional money coming in to be able to survive and weather that storm. So this decision could have literally crushed the livelihood of people. So let me know in the comments if you had a channel that was impacted by these rules and regulations, and if you were monetized, and if you actually had a massive financial impact, and are you going to be trying to get your channel back now that you know this information? I'd be interested to know. But it's a serious thing because it's probably too little too late. I mean, some people are resourceful and people can survive the storm, but I cannot imagine being a full-time YouTuber covering this type of content, and then especially if I had a stage, because when you talk about COVID-19 and things like election fraud, that's content that generates millions of views. Those are high. That's real high view stuff. That's controversial stuff. That's polarizing stuff. That's the stuff that the algorithm feeds on and pushes out to people. That's stuff that people consume on rapid. That's attention grabbing stuff. That's arguments for days. That's money for days. That's ad revenue. That's eyeballs for days. And people lost out. And I think that more than a sorry welcome back is needed, in all honesty. As a creator on this platform, I'm not monetized right now. And are they going to learn their lessons going forward in the future? Is this sort of thing going to happen again? What can I expect? I don't know. But my recommendation would be is to always make sure you have multiple income streams, whether that be income streams from multiple platforms, multiple social media platforms, or whatever the case would be. That would be my recommendation. Anyhow, let's dive in a little bit deeper and see if we can get some more context regarding the tensions and the things that YouTube says they believe in, right? Section 24, we value conservative voices. YouTube values conservative voices on its platform and recognizes that these creators have extensive reach and play an important role in civic discourse. The company recognizes these creators are among those shaping today's online consumption, landing must-watch interviews, giving viewers a chance to hear directly from politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and more. This is really important. This is a really important thing, at least for me specifically, right? Because if we look at the political climate over the last, let me say, from Obama moving through to Trump, moving through to Biden, back to Trump, and if we bring in Twitter specifically, and Elon Musk stepping in to purchase Twitter to give conservatives a platform to be able to speak on their views. It's obvious to me that conservative voices were being silenced. It's obvious now that we know Twitter was a left-leaning platform. Who's to say that YouTube isn't a left-leaning platform, right? Who's to say YouTube leadership isn't left-leaning? I don't know. There could be a mix. It could be diverse. But it is something that we need to consider, especially when we realize what happened at Twitter. Especially when they could come and say no, because this statement here, no, again, you can see my inference with ChatGPT was aligned. This statement here, no, is inferring that conservative voices are on the rise. It's inferring that conservative voices have an active and important part to play in the political sphere, in political discourse. Important. If we look at, obviously, Joe Rogan is not a conservative, but he's a platform that allows all kind of views, to the point where some people is say, well, maybe he shouldn't let this person on, or maybe he shouldn't let that person on, but he's a free speech advocate. And when you look at the new media and you look at the shift, and this is a potential, this is an opportunity that I want you guys to take note of, right? You look at the shift of how we are consuming our media. A lot of us don't go to the Fox News, don't go to the ABC, don't go to the NBC, don't go to the CNN. You guys come here and are looking for independent voices and independent media, and that shift is continuing more and more and more and more and more. People shifting away, the rate is plummeting, and people coming to YouTube as a platform looking for information. So this one is for you, YouTube. I hope you stick to your guns here in terms of saying that you value conservative voices, and you continue to learn from your mistakes and build a platform that allows both democratic and conservative voices to have clean, fair, unbiased political discourse without being interfered by government or by your policies. Because if we're going to survive as a country and we're going to move forward as a country, you know, as Charlie Kirk advocated for, we need to have discourse, not just discourse, but specifically talk to people that we don't agree with. And if you don't agree with my position right now, let me know in the comments, because this is a discussion that we need to have. Because on the one hand, you have people that were cheering, unfortunately, cheering for the fact that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And then you had people, same people that were cheering for the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the silencing of a voice, now crying foul when Jimmy Kimmel was suspended for the few days that he was suspended for. And we got to be able to agree to disagree, and we got to be fair. We can't say it's bad to cancel Jimmy Kimmel and then cheer that Charlie Kirk get assassinated. That's just wrong. And I will hope, regardless of if you's a Democratic voice or if you's a conservative voice, or if you find yourself in the middle and you don't have a side, I think we could all agree that that's bad. What happened to Charlie Kirk is bad, right? In my opinion, how Jimmy Kimmel handled the situation is bad too. And then in some people's opinion, the FCC should have never bent on Benny Johnson and threatened to pull the licenses. Some people think that that's bad too. But regardless of where you sit, none of our thoughts, none of our ideas, none of our beliefs are going to matter if we stand by and let censorship happen. So YouTube, if you value conservative voices, I hope you stick to your guns. Goes on to say that they push back on improper requests. So more of, all right, well, we did it, but we still fight against it. But let's go through it. Government and law enforcement entities make legal requests in an effort to moderate content according to their views, and their demands come with significant penalties for non-compliance. Alphabet has a track record of pushing back against overly broad or otherwise inappropriate government demands for user data and content removals, including objecting to some demands entirely. There are many sometimes object to and narrow down specific demands from, governments or organizations. Now this circles back to what I was mentioning earlier when I was wondering about how significant these penalties are, but this seems to also be talking about something else. It says government and law enforcement entities make legal requests in an effort to moderate content according to their views, and their demands come with significant penalties for non-compliance. But to me, that sounds like they can push back on legal grounds, which again still kind of worries me that they didn't push back if they had legal standing to do it and fought it in court, right? But sounds that they could and sounds that they do. So I'm gonna start talking about the future of YouTube here in a second, and then some opportunities, and then we gonna wrap up this video. But before I get there, I want to touch on what's happening in Europe, because creators are all over the world. Not only are creators all over the world, we have creators that are creating here and the content is being consumed in Europe. And in my intro, I kind of made mention to some stuff that's happening in Europe that's concerning in terms of like censorship, right? Here, section 27 talks about EU, DSA, and DMA concerns. It says here, the committee has taken important investigative steps to highlight that onerous obligation under laws such as the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act may stifle innovation and restrict access to information. These laws place a disproportionate regulatory burden on American companies, and the company has long expressed its concern about the risk that the DSA may pose to freedom of expression within and outside of the European Union, depending on how certain provisions may be enforced. The DSA could be interpreted in such a way as to require Alphabet and other providers of intermediary services to remove lawful content, jeopardizing the company's ability to develop and enforce global policies that support rights of free expression and access to information. The DSA may open avenues for substantial regulation of lawful speech, including through risk mitigation, the use of codes of conduct and crisis protocols, and out-of-court disputes, and the out-of-court dispute settlement mechanism. Alphabet remains mindful of these risks and continues to be vigilant in its defense of these rights. So, a quick explanation about what the Digital Services Act is. It's an EU law for online intermediaries, which means hosting social platforms and marketplaces. It requires notice and action, transparency, ad labels, data access for researchers. And then for very large platforms, it mandates systemic risk assessments, mitigation measures, independent audits, faster crisis response. And then there's big fines for non-compliance, incentives to remove borderline lawful content. Now, like I said, freedom of speech isn't just under attack in America. Freedom of speech under attack all over the world. And when you look at the pressures, or where the pressure of freedom of speech comes from, it usually comes from government, local government, which is why in America the First Amendment is so important, because it protects its citizens from local government, because they need to be able to speak up, especially when things are not going their way. When you look at the fact that there was this guy, I can put the picture up on the screen, was in America, made a tweet in America on X. I don't know what he's calling tweets or X's. Anyhow, he was on X and he made a comment while he was on vacation in America. And when he got back home to the UK, they were waiting for him at the airport and they arrested him for the comment that he made on a social media platform outside of the UK. And not only did he make it outside of the UK, he made it on a platform that doesn't belong to the UK, and he still paid the price for it. So we gotta be aware of this when we creating our content, the ramifications of how other governments and laws could possibly impact us, right? Does it mean that we could create something that is offensive to someone in the UK, and if we go to the UK, as soon as we touch down, we get arrested? Yeah, it's crazy to think about, right? But clearly what it means is that these rules can push platforms to remove otherwise lawful content, sort of like what the Biden administration did. And we could all agree that what the Biden administration did is not a good thing. What the UK government is doing is not a good thing. People should be allowed to express themselves freely, as long as you ain't breaking certain rules. And I think it's pretty reasonable what the rules are. You can't tell lies, can't defame people, can't incite violence, etc., etc., etc. But that's a thin line to cross when you start talking about things like hate speech. How do you police that kind of stuff? What is hate speech? Let me know in the comments who you think what hate speech is. Let me know in the comments if you think that hate speech is something that we can regulate, because in the UK, that's kind of the angle that they use. If you're from the UK, can you confirm that that's the angle that they use in the UK when they start talking about things like hate speech and they use that as a way to get at people? Because agreeing or disagreeing with certain realities as it pertains to science doesn't necessarily mean hate speech. But let me know what you think in the comments. So let me talk about the future. Section 20, which talks about forward commitment. It says here, no matter the political atmosphere, YouTube will continue to enable free expression on its platform, particularly as it relates to issues subject to political debate. Political debate and discussion are in the public's interest, which is why YouTube expanded its approach to educational, documentary, scientific, and artistic content on the platform. So what this means is they're doubling down on creating a safe space for political debate, which is good, because that's what Charlie Kirk died for. He died for promoting and supporting political discourse. And discourse of any kind, disagreements, finding common ground. And this is my opinion. You can let me know in the comments. But I think that they're doubling down here because they realize there has been a significant political shift in the United States of America right now. Trump's victory, like it or not, signifies a great shift in terms of the thinking of Americans, especially when you look at the results. People feel more comfortable speaking up. People feel more comfortable expressing the views. Before times, I knew people that would come out and say, conservative people that would come to me and tell me that they feel like they got to keep their political ideas and their political beliefs private because of the backlash that they will receive. And if you're a conservative viewer, let me know in the comments if you felt that way in the past and how you feel now. Because I could tell you right now that it was obvious that conservatives were viewed as pariahs. The other side made it clear, especially when you look at the comments on Blue Sky about Charlie Kirk's death. These people are very vocal about how they feel about it. And it was the same thing on Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. You could see that there was an overwhelming majority of opinions from democratic voices. And I think YouTube is noticing the shift, and I think YouTube has recognized that it needs to be balanced. And it's true, and it needs to be balanced. It needs to be balanced, diverse thought. Diversity ain't just skin color. Diversity is thought as well, because we all have different thoughts. And whenever done, any solution that we have needs to be bipartisan, or should be bipartisan, because there's good bits on both sides, right? Next thing that I really want to call out, it sounds like YouTube is looking to implement some sort of community notes. Says here in section 22 about notes. It's a context tool. YouTube also began offering a feature on YouTube beginning in June 2024 that allows users to add notes to provide relevant, timely, and understandable context on videos. The pilot is available on mobile in the US and in English, and YouTube continues to collect feedback on the future. YouTube also features an extensive comment section where viewers can comment and share their views on content posted by creators. So it sounds like you can have user added notes to add context without deleting videos, and if scaled, could reduce takedowns while improving viewer understanding. Now, I don't know how useful that is because there's the description section, there's the comment section, and it just sounds like a little extra feature that they're adding, but not gonna spend too much time on that. Just kind of interesting to see that that's the direction they're going. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunities that they have here. This is the really important part here because I know this video was kind of heavy and it's gonna be one of my longer videos, but I don't want you to be discouraged. I just wanted to bring this information to light because knowledge is power, and the more that we know about how these platforms operate, the more that we can prepare ourselves to take our vision into the future. Because a lot of you here on the platform dreaming of making it big, dreaming of making a living from YouTube, and living and exploring and enjoying the financial freedom that comes from being a content creator. It's a great place to be, and it's not all doom and gloom. So let's talk about some of the opportunities on the platform, where the platform is in its current state, and go from there. Scale and mission. YouTube's mission is to give everyone a voice and show them the world. Every day, YouTube builds and improves tools and systems that empower creators, viewers, and businesses to find and share information. Over 2 billion logged in users worldwide visit each month, and over 500 hours of content are uploaded every minute by an extraordinarily diverse community of creators who span over 100 countries and 80 languages. On a daily basis, users watch over 1 billion hours of video on YouTube. Massive distribution, massive opportunity for exposure, regardless of your language, regardless of where you're located, and regardless of your beliefs. So keep that in mind. It's not all doom and gloom. YouTube really is still the best place to be heard at scale. 12, viewpoint diversity and expression. There's a wider variety of views on YouTube platform than on any other information source in history. YouTube will strive to foster self-expression and an array of topics as diverse as its user base, to nurture a thriving, creative, and informational ecosystem, and to be the engine of economic opportunity. This is kind of, YouTube kind of bigging out itself, and in all rights, right? Obviously here they're admitting that they made a mistake, but even though that they made a mistake, there's still a big platform and there's still huge opportunities. So let that be the takeaway. Next, we have the economic impact. And this is why I always tell people, like, the creator economy is the biggest, one of the biggest economies right now, and it's one of the best places to make money right now. Huge opportunities regardless of the challenges. So hear me out. YouTube's creative ecosystem supported more than 490,000 full-time American jobs and contributed $55 billion to the US economy in 2024, according to research from Oxford Economics. Facts, big facts here, buddy. That is where the money is. So despite the challenges, despite of how frustrated we could be right now when it comes to freedom of speech, there's still a lot to be gained from utilizing this platform and from crafting and curating your content and getting eyeballs on your content, right? Don't build just yet. Let me absorb the information that we learned today and let me adapt to our situation, because adaptation is the key to survival, right? When you look at any kind of evolution, any kind of revolution, it always comes down to how quickly you can adapt, how quickly you can change, how quickly can you learn about your current situation, and how quickly can you improve, right? So before I wrap up, let me touch on the whole shadow banning thing. I want to hear ideas in the comment section below regarding shadow banning, right? Because I got some information, I got some new information this week, and as I tell a friend of mine the other day, if you're not changing your position when you get new information, you're not learning anything. You're just wasting time, right? That might sound a little bit rough, but it's a reality situation. The whole idea behind getting new information is to use that information to change your position. And don't get me wrong, you can change your position even if you get information that doesn't align with your worldview. You can still use that information to change your position. You don't have to change your mind. You don't have to say, well, or believe differently, but you can use that information to make changes to be able to maneuver in the world, right? So is shadow banning a real thing? I will have to say yes. In certain instances, YouTube has the capability to limit or restrict whatever content they choose is, because at the end of the day, it's their platform, which is why understanding their policies and guidelines is going to be important. And if we review the information from Section 18, 19, and 23, it is clear that censorship can happen. It is clear that they can restrict content, and it is clear that they can ban you at will. And that's as far as I would say in terms of how my opinion on shadow banning has shifted. On the other side of things, I think that shadow banning is something that people use as an excuse for poorly performing content. If their content isn't getting the amount of eyeballs that they want, if it isn't getting the amount of views that they want, they say, oh, I must be shadow banned. Because, and I say that because of the information, the evidence that we received today. Clearly, they're doing it to specific types of content. So I don't think that I mean that just because my content says something that I believe should be out there and nobody ain't watching it, it means that I shadow ban. No, it's very specific types of content here that YouTube is addressing. Do they have the capability and the power to do stuff like that? Obviously, they own the platform. Obviously, they can do it. Is it beneficial for them to just decide, oh, well, Andre's video today talking about the letter is something that I decide should be shadow banned, so I'm not going to give that content any exposure? I don't think that's how it works. I don't. I would more look at, if this video doesn't perform well, I would more look at how could I have done this video better to be able to get the amount of eyeballs that I wanted to get on it. And that is how we should be looking at our content. Because at the end of the day, if you have good content, you got good content. You're going to be shadow banned. Because technically speaking, if you shadow ban on this platform, you could take your content to another platform. And technically speaking, if your content is as good as you say it is, it should perform well when you put it on another platform. Bearing in mind that each platform audience has different consumption habits, different lifestyles, different topics, different interests, etc. But while shadow banning is real, shadow banning also still ain't real. That's my take on it. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Lots of information that we discussed today. I really enjoy sitting here chatting with you. Let me know in the comments what you think on each point. I think we could really generate some good conversation, and we could let YouTube know that we listening to what you say, we watching you, and we plan to hold you accountable. Right? Peace, brethren.